Okay, hello again. I'm very happy to present my paper titled Antecedents of Environment, Social and Governance Disclosure, Evidence from the UK Extractive and Retail Sectors. Currently, I'm working with Kemi, Bola, and Maria on this paper. So first of all, I will provide a summary of research questions. So in other words, what we are trying to do in this paper. So we have a essential research questions, which is what is the level of environment, social and governance disclosure among UK extractive and retail sectors. And then the supplementary research question is whether corporate board characteristics and firms characteristics can explain observable difference in the extent of ESG disclosure. So what do we find? So our main findings shows the level of CSR disclosure from extractive sector is much higher than the counterparties of retail sector. Secondly, the CSR disclosure is positively and significantly associated with board gender diversity, board independence, board size. However, we do not find evidence that board meetings and CEO dualities have any impact on CSR disclosure. And furthermore, the impact of corporate boards characteristics and firms characteristics on ESG disclosure differs across retail and extractive sectors. In terms of the motivations of this study, I think as you are aware, corporate social responsibility is a global issue. Okay, so recent corporate scandals have attracted, I think, great attentions from various stakeholders. And therefore, there is a need for a transparency in the reporting. A recent survey by KPMG 2017 indicates there has been a general increase in the global awareness and also importance of CSR reporting. I think quite lots of big companies, they're starting to report the CSR information in the annual report. And in the UK, many initiatives and regulations have been introduced to promote the development of CSR. And also this survey shows the extractive sector as a leader in the CSR reporting, whereas retail companies have been the lowest CSR reporting rate. And on the other hand, it's quite interesting, we find the majority of CSR scandals, such as environmental disasters and some of the human rights incidents, have arisen mainly from the extractive sectors. And the final motivations for this study is the studies on ESG and corporate board and firm characteristics, especially focusing on extractive and retail sectors, are quite rare. So related literature, hypothesis developments. I mean, in this paper, we're looking at five different factors. Okay, 5 different corporate boards characteristics. So, namely, the board gender diversity, the board independence, board size, board meetings, and CEO duality. Okay, so I'll start with the first one. Okay, so gender diversity. So shareholders, I think they have a different interests in a firm. So the board gender diversity can bring different perspectives and also opinions on the board to address different issues raised by the stakeholders. And we argue that gender diverse boards are more effective in monitoring and influencing the management and also the decision-making process, which can increase the quality of those decisions, leading to a positive impact on the firm performance. The literature has also found the presence of independent directors on a board improves corporate decision making and increased access to available resources through their oversight roles, and mitigating agency problems and also increase firm performance. And independent directors add values to a company's board in the forms of human and relation capitals, including unique skills, professional expertise, external links, which can attract critical resources, resolving environmental uncertainties, leading to an improved corporate social performance. In terms of board size, according to the stakeholder theory, so that the large boards are more likely to represent the interests of multiple shareholders and show great orientations towards disclosure of relevant CSR information. And from the perspective of resource-based theory, a large board may enhance board effectiveness by relying on diverse expertise, skills, resources, and also counterbalance CEO's dominance. The number of board meetings is another governance mechanism. We considered existing studies mention that the frequency number of board meetings measure the board diligence. So its effectiveness and also the level of monitoring activities it delivers. So for example, this 2018 argue that firms are more socially and environmentally responsible when board of directors meets regularly to discuss CSR related issues. So finally, the CEO dualities represent a conflict of interest because it's, if someone holds, two roles at the same time, they may have too much power, and which can impeding the effective functionality of the boards. And there are also a number of studies reported CEO duality has a negative relation with the CSR disclosure. So based on those discussions, we have developed the following 5 hypotheses, okay? So research designs, data and sample. So our data are mainly collected from, I think, 3 sources. So the ESG disclosure, including environmental, social governance disclosures, are collected from Bloomberg terminal, and the corporate board's characteristics and control variables are mainly collected from the FAME and annual reports. For example, gender diversity, for independence, for size, for meeting, CEO dualities, and a number of controls, leverage, total assets, topping skewed, ROA, etc. And our sample covers all the firms in the UK extractive and the retail industries between 2005 and 2018. And so here is the regression models we are using. I think is quite straightforward. So on the left-hand side, which is the dependent variables, we have ESG disclosures. And right-hand side, we have a board characteristics and plus a number of control variables. Summary descriptive statistics shows the overall ESG disclosure and also the environmental social governance disclosure respectively for the full sample, and also 2 sectors individually. So if we just look at full sample, and the average score for the overall ESG is 36.42, and it ranges from 4.78 to 70.12. Similarly, the level of environmental social governance disclosure also vary substantially. So as you can see, so if we look at the UK retail industries and the UK extractive industries, we can see quite big difference. Okay, so first of all, I think the overall ESG disclosures for the retail sectors is much lower than the extractive industry. I think this finding are consistent with the the survey, right? The survey KPMG 2017 survey report. So this is the summary descriptive statistics for the corporate board characteristics. So as you can see here, the mean value of board diversity is 0.13. So roughly they are about 13% of the directors, they are female. So that indicates, the board, I think they are still dominated by the male directors. The mean value for the IND, which is the independent director, is 58.3. So that means I think just over 50%. So majority of the directors, they are non-executive directors in this case. The board size ranges from 4 to 17. So with mean value, which is 9. So there are about 9 members on sitting on the board. Okay, and then we have the board meetings and also the dualities. Okay, so board meetings are about 8. So they're holding 8 meetings a year, and dualities we can see is very number is very small. Okay, so I think majority of the board, they are actually separating the roles. Okay, which is I think is following the UK corporate governance codes. Okay. And then we also, if we move on to the these 2 sectors, so I think one difference we can observe is the board diversity. Okay, so it's clearly we can see in the UK retail industries, so the females, I mean the diversity ratio is 70% compared to 10%, which is from the extractive industry. So I think that's some difference between those 2 sectors. But in terms of board independence and board size, I think those 2 sectors seems quite similar. Okay, seems quite similar. And now we have the correlation metrics. So from these tables, we can see there are significant relationship between ESG disclosure and corporate board characteristics, and also some firms characteristics. And this table also confirms the multicollinearity issues may not be that severe in our models because the level of correlation between variables are relatively low. And furthermore, we have used the VIF test to double check the potential issue of multicollinearity, and that's the results confirm the previous findings. Okay, the VIF numbers are well below 10, I think, which is was normally used in the literature, right? Okay, now let's have a look at the regression results. So if we just look at the column number 1, okay, so column number 1 is estimated using the overall ESG disclosure as the dependent variable. So the first one is the coefficient of board diversity. We can see is positively and significant at 1% level. Therefore, hypothesis 1 is supported. I think these findings are consistent with previous studies which reported a positive relationship between diversity and ESG disclosure. So that indicates the diversified boards may put more pressure on directors to engage in the implementation of CSR strategies. So in order to enhance the legitimacy of firm and attract resources from the stakeholders. Secondly, it's also consistent with our expectation. So board independence is positively and significant associated with ESG disclosure at 1%. So therefore, hypothesis 2 is supported. So the findings, again, consistent with previous studies, which conclude boards with a great proportion of non-executive directors tend to disclose more information on CSR, okay? Therefore, enhance the transparency and also the corporate legitimacy. Third, the coefficient on both sides, again, is positive and significant at 1% level. Therefore, hypothesis 3 is supported. And again, the findings are aligned with some of the previous studies, which stated the larger board provides better monitoring, including CSR implementations and disclosures. They offer more diverse and critical resources to the firms. However, we do not find board meetings and also the dualities have a significant impact on ESG disclosure. As you can see, the signs is for board meeting is negative, for duality is positive, but they are not significant. Okay. But we also investigate the individual components is on the governance and social and also the environmental disclosures.
Jan, I apologize. You have 1 minute left.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So if we look at those three, four columns, they are similar to the column number 1. Okay, the findings which is quite similar. Okay. Then we move on to the regression analysis. We look at the sectors impact. Okay, we divide them into 2 sectors. So column 1 to 4 is the retail. Column 5 to 8 is the extractive sector. So we find some differences between 2 sectors. So some variables, they are significant in one sector, but not significantly in the other sectors. Okay, so there's another findings from our study. So we're still working on the papers. Okay, so we will, at the moment we are working on the additional analysis. So trying to using different proxies and also trying to address the genetic issues. So we're trying to use the 2-stage least square and potentially use GMM to further test the robustness of the findings. The main conclusions, so industry profile is the leading factors affecting CSR disclosure, and that leading to a significant difference in CSR disclosure rate and also mechanisms across both industry. And board characteristics and firms characteristics have significant and positive impact on CSR disclosure. Implication is UK authorities, they may want to introduce additional changes in the existing regulations to further strengthen the CSR engagements across UK companies. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. Any questions or comments?
Thank you very much for your presentation. So now we move into the discussion of this paper. So discussant is Jin Min Kuo, University of Birmingham. Do we have a discussant? I am pretty sure I've seen, yeah. Okay, thank you. We can see the slides, but we cannot hear anything.
Yeah. we still cannot hear you. I mean, for some reason. Still no voice, Jingming.
There seems to be a problem with the sound.
Yeah.
We have here.
I can see that the microphone seems not mute, but just for some reason we cannot hear you.
So we do have a technical support in this session. Maybe they can help us.
Yes, I'm here, but as the other said, the microphone is not mute, so it's not an issue. It seems an issue with the microphone itself. If he can provide me, if he can hear me, can provide the team viewer through the email ID and password, I can connect and have a look. He did send me an email.
Jinmin, we're sorry, we cannot hear you. Can you hear us? Just something with the mic.
Can he unmute the microphone? I believe it is muted, his microphone.
But doesn't show it's muted.
No, I didn't show it's mute.
Okay, so maybe for the sake of time, we proceed with the next paper, and then at the end of the session, hopefully Jinmin will have a microphone working, and we'll come back for discussion of this paper. Will this work?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes. Jinmin, yes. Now we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I don't know what
Okay.
happened, but because earlier at the beginning of the session, you can hear my voice, right? At that time.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, and then just disappeared.
I don't know what happened. So I'm very sorry for the delay. Yeah, so I just try to speed up. Okay. So we can continue on time. So it's my pleasure to discuss this paper. So I just make it clearer here. Okay, so this paper looks at.
Sorry, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Would you be able to share your screen with us so we can see the slides?
Okay. Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so it's my pleasure to discuss this paper. And this study looks at two main research questions. The first one is about the level of environment, social governance disclosure in the UK markets, especially for the extractive and the retail sectors. And another research question is about whether corporate board characteristics and fund characteristics can explain the observable differences between the two sectors in terms of the ESG disclosure. So here, just very quickly, just summarize the findings given by this paper. First of all, the level of CSR disclosure is much higher for the extractive sector compared with the disclosure level of the retail sector. And more importantly, the authors found the CSR disclosure is positively associated with the board characteristics such as the board gender diversity, the board independence, and the board size. However, they did not find any supportive evidence about the board meeting as well as the CEO duality. And then finally, the impact of the board characteristics on the ESG disclosure are different between the two sectors, the retail and the extractive sectors. Just very quickly, I think the topic is very interesting, especially this paper look at the UK firms, and more importantly, this paper, the authors follow the findings given by the KPMG survey in 2017. So they look at, in particular, the two sectors, the extractive sector with the highest CSR reporting rate and the retail sector with the lowest CSR reporting rate. And I really enjoy reading the paper because it's very well written. I just have some major comments. First one, because if we look at the previous studies in the corporate governance area, then there are some evidence showing that there can be a kind of nonlinear relationship between the board characteristics and the financial performance of corporations or earnings management activities and so on. So I just wondering, because this paper, the authors, they look at the linear relationship between the board characteristics and the ESG disclosure. So maybe they can try, like, for example, for the board size or the board meetings, they can try to test the non-linear relationship between the board size and the ESG disclosure, for example. And also prior studies, they also point out the CSR activities may be strongly influenced by the institutional ownership. Okay, and also the quality of financial reports may be significantly influenced by the financial analysts. So it can be interesting for the authors to look at, okay, or we said as a kind of control variable to consider controlling for the impact of institutional ownership or the analyst following. And also because the authors, they only look at the selected sectors, some particular industries. So the authors may also want to address the potential selection bias. And finally, because if we look at the equation given by the authors, okay, they use the dependent variables and the independent variables at the time t. So I think, at the moment, the authors only look at the associations between the dependent variable and the independent variable. It may be of interest to look at the lead-lag relationship, which means the authors can try to use the corporate or we say the board characteristics in the previous period at the time t-1, okay, instead of time t. And then finally, I just have some very minor comments. Okay, for example, the authors may want to spend more space on the discussion about the generalization of the findings, because they, in the study, especially the empirical analysis, they only look at the two particular sectors. And also, it may be a good idea to provide the number of observations in the tables and include page numbers, so it's easier for the readers. And for the standard errors, the authors may consider using clustered standard errors, because for some companies in these two sectors, they may share some common characteristics. And then finally, in table 6, okay, because the authors have two panels, okay, for different industries. So if the authors can put down the headings for each panel, then it may be easier for the readers to understand. So I think that's all for my major and minor comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your discussion. Unfortunately, no time for response or questions from the audience. So maybe